Good morning. Well, today, Berta gets new batteries, and we're going to talk electrical. Talk about some of the things I found, some of the things I fixed while she was over at a sleepover at the neighbor's house. Oh yeah, that's right, we got an emergency brake now. Look at that. Glorious. If you're going to run a manual, I'm a pretty firm believer you got to have an e-brake. That's the thing. So, today, new batteries. Off we go. How I like to do things is I like to get a small win under my belt before I start any kind of project. I like to go and just get a win. You know, get one for the team. Oh, I see. When they say left and right, they weren't kidding. So we're gonna fix this tailgate cable. So right off the hop, no matter what today, I for sure got one thing done. Tight. Oh, Amazon. You silly buggers. Wow. That completely in every way, shape, or form took the wind out of my sails. Oh. Fail, Amazon. Oh, wait. Bad installer. Wind. Well, that'll do it. That was an obvious mistake, too. Look at that. We got tailgate action. Dual straps. I think she's 43% stronger now. This one is acceptable. But, you know what? Let's change this one, too. Since we got two brand new ones, we'll keep this old janky one as a spare. And this way, down the road, we'll have a backup. And these ones are going to start off life at the same place. Perfect. All right, we got a win. We're moving on. Well, I am pleasantly surprised to report that thus far, confirmed, every battery terminal will use the same wrench, which I am shocked, because everything that I've taken off this truck has had multiple sized bolt heads in it. So that's pleasant to report. I would love to tidy up a lot of this wiring, but that is just not in the scope of today's project. It is, let's see what we got here. We got a negative still hooked up, so we better leave that there. Now we take this one off. Now we are ungrounded. Now we can touch things to things. I would love nothing more than to clean up this rat's nest of wiring. Specifically that battery terminal that's been reconfigured to not have a cable on it anymore, instead just be a post. But that's just beyond the scope of today's project. I will look into it a little bit and make sure there's nothing horrible going on, but it worked before. So I'm just going to change the batteries for now. And I would love to be doing this outside today. I started to, and then I quickly realized that it is just not fun to have cold hands. So I gave up on that plan and proceeded to shove it in my shop. This is how much room I have to work in here. And it is literally touching the door. I roll it in, I shut the door, and I roll it back to get that extra 2 inches up here. Because, you know, 2 inches matters. Just saying. So today, we're going to get the new batteries in, and we're going to talk electrical and some of the things that I figured out. Although I said that already. One of the main reasons I wanted to bring it in the shop to work on it was because I knew that the terminals were probably going to be corroded and then they needed to be cleaned up. And I wanted to have the patience because although I'm not going to fix a lot of this wiring, I do want to get it hooked up properly and dielectric grease and cleaned. And I've already hit my first hurdle. I got this battery hold down bolt out, no problem. This one, when I put the wrench on it, I heard bad things happening. And sure enough, that's because it's broken already and there's something going on down there. So now we're going to pull the battery tray and see what's going on down there. So off we go. So something I never pointed out before, but using my powers of deduction. Battery tray is clearly broken. Fender is blue. Hood latch was blue. Now, for sure, this has been in some kind of accidente. Also, when I noticed the bumper bolts were missing, the headlight had neither of the bolts holding it in either and was flopping around, along with the other side. So I added those as well. They're poorly aimed right now. I have to aim them better. We will be taking the tray out and making something happen so that this hold down is adequate. I mean, I'm guilty of running around with like a bungee cord holding the battery down, but you know what? That's bad times when it hits the hood, let me tell you. And it's even worse times when it's like no longer in the battery tray and it's in your fan. So we're gonna fix it properly-ish. And I'm gonna add that onto my list of things to look for when I go to the scrapyard looking for parts. So off we go. Well, things have escalated. So they've added this here piece of 1/4-inch plate to make up for the giant hole in the bottom of here. So I'm gonna figure something out for that. I further discovered that the battery temperature sensor, along with not even being plugged in, is, I would argue, inoperably damaged, possibly, which would make sense. So I'm gonna see if I can't just repair these wires, and I bet you I haven't looked yet. So let's see here. It's dirty down here. Somewhere in here I expect to find a wire that goes nowhere, and that's going to be the other end of that battery temperature sensor. I'll dig around in here a little bit. And also, now that I've gone this far, the cruise control vacuum line, which was right here, I taped up the end and plugged it because it was broken off the cruise control and I couldn't get at that nub and get that off. I'm going to see if I can't fix that vacuum line while I'm in here. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind fixing stuff properly, but I'm not going to lie, I get a pretty thorough amount of enjoyment out of cobbling stuff together and making it work. So, I'm going to not use flux on my wire. I'm going to use a lighter on my heat shrink. I'm going to use brake cleaner to clean the connection. And I did put actual dielectric grease in there. Oh, neighbor's home. Going hard on them Jakes. That feller's got him a pretty gnarly logging rig. Nice cab over too that he's been working on. I haven't seen the cab over on the road yet, but his long nose Pete sure looks good. Anyway, moving on. Cruise control is reattached. Anti-seize on the bolts. Redesigned custom battery hold down nut holder. Notched to fit. I just cobbled that in there. I just want that battery secured. I'm gonna not deal with that right now. Quite frankly, I don't know how many bolts a battery tray needs to be held down, but I think 5 is sufficient. I mean, there's only 8 that hold the wheel on. So, yeah, 5 13 mils I think is plenty. And we're gonna omit that corner mod there, and yeah. I got my wires soldered back together for my battery temperature sensor. We're going to reinstall that. Dielectric grease in there. I worked it in and out of the plug 1,000 times. So hopefully it works when I plug it in. And yeah, we'll put this side back together and get this side battery and clean up those terminals and move on to the other side. I haven't tried getting that rod out of there yet, but I think it's been percolating long enough that we're going to have a go at that. And hopefully in about 15-20 minutes, we'll have it back together. I was finally able to get that rod out of the other side. I let it soak just enough. I was able to get on it with some vice grips and get it out. That head is so corroded that it's not any size. And had I tried to turn it by the head, it would have snapped where it's all rotten. But lucky for me, I went through my junk, and sure enough, I have one. I'm assuming that's off my Jeep, off my parts truck that I had a couple years ago. But yeah, score one for the junk pile. That ended up being a lot more than I bargained for. I thought, oh, 15 minutes, I'll swap them batteries. 3 hours later, we have batteries. They're just cheap. There's a place in town, they sell them, I think. I don't know that you can get a cheaper battery than that battery. It is a Group 34, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know where it says on it. I think it's a 34. Yeah, Group 34. And it's 800 ccas. I got a dose of them. Apparently Group 27's what came in here. They had them on the shelf. They were 780 ccas. And they were the same price. And they were bigger. And I was like, well, these ones are smaller. Generally, I like a bigger battery. But I know the one that was on this side was not fitting in the tray at all. And that the one on that side was a Group 34. So that's what I went with. The one that was on the passenger side there is this one. It was a Group 65. And it was nowhere near fitting in there. So I put everything back the way it was. Sorry for being all speedy on the camera. And then on that side, all I did was put a different positive because that positive was horrible. I don't love that either. And I've seen enough now to know that I will be redoing all this wiring. All these connections are all super corroded in the crimps. These ones, the holes are so big, they're barely on there. Like, there's only maybe a 16th to an 1/8 in some places of eyelet left because they've been so wallowed out. And again, corroded in all the crimps. So I'm going to rewire all the way, everything. Little things too, like I saw this. I'm no expert, but I don't like to see connections like that on my grounds. If somewhere is going to give you a problem, it's going to be that one. Now that's a good connector. It's a weather pack. There's probably a rubber O-ring in there, but that's usually something I want to try to avoid. And I'll probably, one of the other reasons I went with this is the posts are in the middle, so I can flip them if they were the wrong way. And I knew they would work just for that reason alone. And then having the side posts, I really liked because it gives me more options, so I can clean up some of these. I can run some of these smaller wires off the side posts and not have 16 things on a stud like that. Spread the load out a little better. I don't know. I'm not an electrical engineer, but I don't like to see that. That doesn't make me happy. There's 4 wires on that post right now. I'd like to see maybe 2 at the most. And then these 2 wires here for my solenoids for my grid heater. I think there's solenoids down there. It's hard to tell. I'm no expert. We're going to be replacing those. They are all kinds of nasty in there. So we'll be getting on that in the future. But I just need batteries that are in there that'll start it, that are held down securely. And so that way when it gets inspected, they don't flag me on not having battery hold downs. And I need it to start because I'll tell you what, you drop a truck off at my shop to do a safety on it, and if it doesn't start, I'm already annoyed. I'm throwing the book at you. So I need it to start when they turn it over if it sits outside for a couple hours after I drop it off. Okay, that'll wrap the battery portion of today up. Now let's talk about electrical. Hold on, I'm going to go shut that leaky air off and get you guys on a tripod. Okay, electrical. So I'm going to tell you about what I discovered when I discovered the reverse lights don't work in this truck and how I went about figuring it out. So I noticed there's no reverse lights. I would show you the back of the truck, but it's right against the door, so we're going to have to just take my word for it. What I did was I pulled the tail light out. First things first, check the bulb. I might have checked the fuse first, but I doubt it. Check the bulb. Bulb was burnt. Put a new bulb in. Still doesn't work. Okay, take my multimeter, check the connection right at the bulb, no power. Go underneath the truck, because I immediately went underneath the truck to the transmission because I had noticed that that was a reman transmission, which means people have been in there. They've done things. They've replaced the transmission. It is super common for guys to break those connectors when they pull trannies out. So I'm feeling around. I cannot find any wires coming out of that transmission. And surely, in order to have reverse lights, the vehicle has to know it's in reverse. So there has to be some kind of sensor on the transmission. I can't find anything. I go so far as to pull the shifter out inside the truck to see if I can see something through the hole. I Google where the plug is because I cannot find it. Google tells me it's right in front, right at the top of the transmission. It's an NV4500, right at the very front, just like 3-4 inches ahead of the shifter. So I feel around. Sure enough, I find the plug. There's no wire plugged into it, but the switch is in the transmission, and I can feel where the locking tab would be. So I have no reverse lights plugged into my transmission, but I do have a switch. So the next thing I look is under the hood in this general area, knowing that somewhere there's probably a wire that's not plugged in that is dangling down, and I'll just have to plug it in. Well, I taped it up now, which I should have filmed all this. I really feel bad about that. But there was work to be done, and I had to do it. There's this wire right here. This wire right here, there's a purple wire and I think a brown wire. And the purple wire, I believe, is the power. So when I found this wire, there was no connector on the end of it. It was just 2 bare wires that were taped up. So somebody broke the connector, did the right thing and taped it up so it wouldn't short out, and just left it hanging down there. And how I determined if it was the reverse lights or not was I found the fuse, because one of those should always have power if the ignition's on. I found the fuse for the reverse lights. I pulled it. I checked it. I had no power. I put it back in, and I made sure they weren't touching anything, and the purple wire had power. So I just right there figured out, okay, that's without a wiring diagram, right? We're just trying to figure stuff out, and I don't want to waste a lot of time. So after I pulled the fuse, I checked. I had power. So, okay, those are my reverse lights. Next thing I did was Google. Get on the Google. Let's get a connector. Well, I find one on Rock Auto or wherever, and they want like $50 for one of these transmissions, for one of these connectors. And all it is, I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like. All it is one of these. I paid for this one in my hand $42.96 Canadian. Now, when I saw that connector online, I knew what it was. I was like, we have tons of those at work. We buy them just kits of connectors that you build yourself. You crimp your own pins on. You comes with all the rubbers, and you put them together yourself, and you can have connectors where you need connectors. And it's just a whatever GM weather pack connector. So I went and bought the one that goes for the transmission. They had to bring it in from another location, but I went and got it. And while I was in the store, I went and looked in their miscellaneous electrical section, and I found this. There's the part number. There's the connector, whatever it is. This was $8. And it comes with a male and the female side. And if you can see, there's the pins that you would put on for the female side. But I only need one side of this connector because the female side is the switch that's in the transmission. I had a good look at the two. They're identical in every way. I crimped the wires on and plugged it in, and I have working reverse lights. So I will be returning this and getting my $42 back. And I will be running the $7 option. And these things are great to have around, by the way. If you ever need to replace a connector, I love these quick connect, quick cable, whatever connectors. You can get them in 2-pin, 4-pin, 6-pin, I think. All kinds of variations, and they're cheap, they're easy, and like I said, if you need one of these and they want $50, what you really need is one of these, and this is Canadian dollars, so you know they were like pesos. Yeah, get the $7 one, works just fine. I haven't returned this back yet, just so I can show you guys that. So if you need to fix your reverse lights, there you go. And if you need the switch, well, I got some info for you there. I know I can't verify any of this because I didn't actually need a switch, but it's the same as a GM, and I'm told the GM one is way cheaper because they put NV4500s in 90s 3/4 ton and 1 ton GMs with this transmission would have that same switch with that same connector. So, little pro tip for you. So once I got that all sorted out and plugged it in, I then had power to the connector that is connected to the pigtail of the tail light, but neither of my tail lights were working. And this is something that's really normal. You fix something and then you still don't have it working at the other end. Well, those lights and the connectors, because this thing's been unplugged for who knows how long, those lights and the connectors have been rendered inoperable just from sitting. So all I did was I plugged them and unplugged them in a bunch of times. I unplug the connector, plug it back in, unplug it, plug it back in, put some dielectric grease on it, plug it back in, unplug it, plug it back in. And after about 5 or 6 times, I had power at the light socket. I put a bulb in it. The bulb still wouldn't go, but I had power right there, so I did the exact same thing. I got in there with some sandpaper, sanded them down, plug, unplug, dielectric grease, plug, unplug, dielectric grease some more, put the light in, boom, lights are working. So I thought I had a lot more to say about this, but kind of the moral of the story is pay attention to the little things because it gives you a feel for the truck. You pay attention to how the previous owner treated it. What kind of repairs did he do? Did he cobble things together or did he do meaningful repairs? Did he try to make things back to stock or did he leave wires just dangling down? And by paying attention to that and noticing that the transmission had been rebuilt, I saved myself a lot of time troubleshooting wiring between the back of the truck and the front of the truck. I could have worked from the back all the way forward. I could have worked from the front all the way back. But having armed with that information that that tranny had been replaced, I figured that was as good a place to start as any because people have been in there. This type of diagnostics only applies to older vehicles that have been messed with. If you've had a truck since brand new and something stops working, you got to troubleshoot that differently. You got to go right to the source, generally speaking. So, that'll conclude today's festivities. Oh, another pro tip, another thing I want to tell you guys too. And this comes up a lot. Like, a lot. When you have a truck that has power windows, power door locks, I haven't had to mess with this one yet, but when you have a truck that has power anything in the door and it stops working, the first place you're going to check is that wire right there. The bundle of wires that gets bent all day, every time you open the door. It gets bent, it goes back, it gets straightened out, it gets bent, it gets straightened out. 9 out of 10 times when a switch stops working, I find a broken wire in there. So that's pro tip number 2 from a non-pro.